So, we all know what the internet is, right? So, basically, back in the mid 20th century, a bunch of government researchers tried their hand at creating a way to make communication and sharing information over long distances more convenient. Little did they know at the time, this would soon become widely known as a very bad move a good 60 something years later. Of course, that statement might be a little hyperbolic, but you have to understand, if you showed a guy from the 60s or hell, even the 80s what we had now, their minds would explode. Back in the day, Pong was the pinnacle of video gaming. What did you think would happen if you slapped a Nintendo Switch with a copy of Splatoon 3 in their hands, huh? I mean, come on. Even getting a computer to sing Daisy Bell back in 1961 was groundbreaking. But I promise you, if that amazed scientists back then, they'd be shitting themselves over the thousand songs people have been making of Hatsune Miku nowadays. Wi-Fi, laptops, streaming, smartphones, social media, all concepts that would have been nothing more than pipe dreams 50 years back, are now just normal parts of everyday life. And as much as old people like to claim otherwise, that isn't a bad thing, or at least not by itself. As long as you've got a solid internet connection, you have access to a nearly unlimited well of knowledge and entertainment basically for free. Well, that is assuming you have the money for an internet provider or a computer or a smart device at the very least. But even if you don't, most libraries have computer access to basically every kid these days gets a school issued laptop of some kind. As time passes, the internet and technology as a whole is becoming more and more present in our lives, and there's really nothing much you can do to change it at this point. Sure, people can whine all they want, but at the end of the day, I can guarantee most of those same people who complain about people being too reliant on technology also don't take the time out of their day to go to the library, read books on the regular. Still, though, it's not like these complaints are entirely unwarranted. Because, on one hand, communication has never been easier. Phone calls, video calls, texting, social media. By all means, people have been talking in ways that will send the average Victorian child from London into anaphylactic shock. Chances are, if you're watching this, you've probably got at least one or more internet friends that live on the opposite side of the planet. But again, if you're watching this video, riddle me this. When was the last time you've seen your IRL friends outside of school? Now, mind you, there's not much shame in that. Fuck, I barely leave my room as is, and I spend most of my time either making video essays or procrastinating. I'm not exactly a good example of someone who has much of a social life outside of the internet either. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not like I don't want to go outside and get wacky antics with my fellow dipshit teenager friends, but what exactly is there to do nowadays? The thing is about real life, given the way late stage capitalism is set up, having a fun time's kinda hard to do right now. Chances are, most of your friends don't live in the same neighborhood as you, so unless one of you has a license, you're kinda boned in that regard. So you either have to rely on your family, or God forbid, the near non-existent public transportation system if you're an American to meet up. And once you do meet up, what exactly do you do from there? Sure, you can go to each other's houses, but that gets boring after a while. You can't just hang around outside because that's loitering and a misdemeanor. So you have to do something to keep yourselves entertained, and that shit costs money most of the time. Like, yeah, don't get me wrong, going to Target with your friends is awesome, but if you're still in high school and or unemployed, what are the chances you have Target money to begin with, huh? By no means is it impossible to have fun outside the house, but with the way things are set up now, it's almost like it's designed specifically in order to make sure having fun is as difficult as possible if you don't have money. And for the most part, yeah, it kinda is, let's be real here. Like I said earlier, when was the last time you went to a library? What about a public park, a community center, the YMCA? Exactly. Everything's either too expensive, too far away, and given how much modern society emphasizes how important it is to dedicate all your free time into grinding, half the time, getting out the house is barely worth all the added stress of planning and getting your money up. Come on, if you don't live in a major city with good public infrastructure and or public transportation system, tough taste, buddy, you're gonna have to pay the gas eventually. And all that's assuming you even like going outside and talking to people to begin with. Take a look around. Have you even been outside these days? This motherfucker's willing to tear up the entirety of the clothing section in Target in June just because he wanted to make a little money off of Pride Month. Let's be honest, people suck, dude. And while there are a lot of cool people out there, you're also running the risk of running into someone who's batshit insane. Which is made even worse if you only got anxiety and barely know to talk to people to begin with. For all the unique problems the internet does have, it's easy to find people who like the same things you do, and most of the time, if things do go bad, it's harder for them to absolutely ruin your life. What are they gonna do? Cyberbully you? The block button's right there. Worst case scenario, you can pull a Tyler the Creator and just turn off your phone for a bit and do something else for a couple hours. That aside, unlike buying gas, you can go to the mall, being terminally online is relatively cheap in comparison. Making a Roblox account is free, and you don't even have to pay to hop on a Discord server to info dump about whatever indie game you're hyperfixated on right now. Not to mention, unlike real life, it also comes with the added benefit of not scaring away all the hoes in the 50-mile radius once you do. Hell, there's even a pretty solid chance you'll meet someone who actually agrees with you. Tell me, do you know what old man Yowie is? I sure do, but I wouldn't be caught dead explaining that shit to a cashier at Wendy's, and I know y'all freaky ass motherfuckers wouldn't either. The added layer of anonymity the internet provides has irrevocably changed how we've come to view socialization. And while it does have its perks, such as letting people explore their identities and express themselves in spaces where they feel more accepted, it's also caused a certain group of people to get a little too comfortable doing whatever they damn please because they know there won't be too many consequences of being a dipshit online in comparison to being a dipshit in real life. It doesn't matter much what name you use to describe this phenomenon because in the end they're all just different names for the same thing. Terminally online, chronically online, a state of being where people opt to spend most of their time on the internet rather than getting out the house for one reason or another. And technically speaking, while caring way too much about petty internet bullshit and knowing way too much about certain niche topics are common symptoms of being terminally online, they're not requirements. In the most basic of definitions, to be terminally online is to spend most of your time online because you don't have much else going on outside of the internet for one reason or another. So, as it turns out, if all you do in your free time is use the internet, more likely than not, you're gonna have a skewed outlook on reality and how things actually work. That's why we see so many people argue about things that actually don't matter all too much online in comparison to real life. Now, why is that? Well, like a lot of things in the past 30 years, a lot of it be chalked up to a bunch of nerds having no other means of communication without other people shunning them. Before the advent of modern fandom culture, people who enjoyed specific pieces of media either had to A. hope they were lucky enough to have friends close by who were into the same stuff, or B. attend conventions and roll the dice meeting strangers. The problem with that, though, in real life, relationships are a much bigger gamble than they are online. They might like the same things you do, sure, but there's no guarantee you'll have anything else in common with you. Think about it. You've probably had the exact same problem if you're on the internet long enough. You know, you run into somebody who's really into the same stuff you are, but apart from that, everything else about them makes you wish you could command grab them through the screen and slam them through the nearest table. But the difference is, unlike talking to people in person, all you really have to do if that guy pisses you off is close the laptop and never interact with them again if you really want to. Not to mention, on the internet, even if you do keep running into people who piss you off, statistically speaking, you're bound to find someone who doesn't eventually. In real life, though, whether it be through school, work, social media, or even family, it's hard to just ignore people you don't like. Now take that problem and multiply it by 1,000 because you're into some really niche shit. Like it or not, fandom culture, and more broadly speaking, the entire spectrum of nerd and geekdom was founded upon the idea of being a social outcast. And unfortunately, it didn't matter if you were a chill person regardless. If you were a nerd, that meant you were associated with those motherfuckers who didn't shower for weeks on end and obsessed about how much better they were than you because they knew more about something than you did. Not only that, but there was also a pretty decent chance they're probably one of the only people within a 50-kilometer radius willing to talk to you to begin with. And even if you're not terminally online, let's be honest, we've all made friends who were only really friends because there wasn't really anyone else to talk to otherwise. Best case scenario, you eventually lose contact and start hanging around people you actually like. Worst case scenario, you're forced to stick around someone you hate because it's either better being alone or you got no choice to deal with it because they won't leave you alone. So, on one hand, the internet made finding people who were actually bearable a million times easier, and if they were unbearable, it made cutting them out of your life just as easy too. Thing is, though, it also made it a million times easier to run into them if you don't know what you're doing either. You remember what I said about the anonymity the internet gives you and how that can be both a good thing and a bad thing? Yeah, it's about time I elaborate further on that. They say bullying got better because people don't get beat up as much anymore, but being completely honest, that's pretty far from the truth. Sure, on a technical standpoint, people don't get jumped as much anymore, but you can chalk that up to zero tolerance policies that end in both the victim and the bully getting in trouble, which is stupid, yeah, but it does technically bring the numbers down. With cyberbullying, though, things are a bit different. Like I said earlier, you can just ignore the initial bullying by just closing the computer and turning off your phone, but the real problems start coming up when it starts affecting your actual life. Timmy might not be able to kick your teeth in anymore, but he can't falsely accuse you of grooming minors and ruin your chances of ever getting a job. Hell, Timmy doesn't even need to live in the same town as you anymore, let alone the same country. If you really wanted to, you can ruin somebody's entire livelihood from continents away. Sure, there may be some exaggerations here and there, but generally speaking, since bullying can't be as direct as it was before the internet became mainstream, it had to change to fit the times. Since you can't be forward about wanting to ruin somebody's reputation without taking a hit to your own, people had to find more discreet ways of dragging someone. For example, cringe culture. So, for those of you out of the loop or intentionally impressing everything you've seen on the internet throughout the mid to late 2010s, let me explain the concept of a cringe compilation to you. A cringe comp, as the name suggests, is a compilation of videos designed to invoke a strong feeling of cringe in the viewer. Why is this important? Back to early to mid 2010s, beginning artists and animators, usually in their adolescence or early teens, would post their artwork of OCs or their hyperfixations for fun. Unbeknownst to them, however, this would run the risk of getting themselves put into the watchful eyes of people who have nothing better to do because they had just committed two of the greatest internet cardinal sins. The sin of not instantly being good at something, and the most outrageous sin of all, actually caring about something. Seeing as a lot of the time, bullying can come from a variety of places jealousy, projection, social pressure, and sometimes just hate for the sake of hate. Because of this, cringe compilations, and by extension, cringe culture as a whole, perfectly encapsulate the many hoops people are willing to go through just to dunk on someone and make it seem hip and cool in today's society. Because ever since we created it, mankind knew that we could not change society, so instead of reflecting upon ourselves, we blamed the beasts. But instead of blaming the beasts, this time people blamed the people who actually cared about things. You see, closely related to cringe culture, we have the much older but still very much relevant irony culture, both of which are byproducts of the internet being a place that, up until recently, was mostly inhabited by social outcasts and rejects. Because of this, a lot of nerd and internet culture, especially in its early years, revolved around individuals fighting in order to be seen as the most composed and intelligent person in the room. You know, so you can epically own people with facts and logic and all that shit. You see, when you fixate the entire personality around being the most based, dreadful, cool, cynical, and objective person in existence, it becomes hard to enjoy things without constantly having to prove your superiority over others. And as you likely figured out by now, the problem is it's actually way harder to work on yourself in comparison than it is to just make someone look worse. Sure, this isn't as easy on the dreaded political end of the spectrum when it comes to cringe comps, but for my people out there who watch animation meme cringe compilations when they were younger, how many of those people who made those videos could even animate, let alone draw? Because I'm gonna keep it stacked with y'all. While pretty much all of them claim to be doing it as only a means to get people to improve, 99% of the time, they were just gathering people's artwork without their knowledge or consent and only using criticism as a thinly veiled excuse to just dunk on people. Why? Some poor kid who just learned how to do digital art made the grave mistake of posting their work online. And looking back, yeah, it's a little cringe, there's no denying that, but there shouldn't be any shame in it being cringe. Hell, if you picked up art as a hobby within the past 10 years and or born in the early 2000s, these shits probably stunted your artistic growth hard because if you thought you shared anything in common with the people in these cringe compilations, you would be cringe by association. Now, why would I know that? You guessed it, I was a dumb kid who set their artistic development back by years because I wasted time worrying about the opinions of people who didn't know I existed instead of actually just getting better. I, and so many others like myself, changed their entire outlook on art as a whole and maybe even dropped it as a hobby, out of fear of being seen as cringe and being made fun of for it. And looking back, it's become more and more obvious that cringe culture was created as a means for others to flaunt their hatred of certain groups of people in a more socially acceptable way than just attacking them directly. To be cringe, in the eyes of the internet, is to have an earnest appreciation for just about anything. Of course, edgelords suffering from 15 different kinds of irony points you could think that's a bad thing. And to that I say, what's lamer? Being so consumed by your own perceived level of coolness that you don't genuinely enjoy anything anymore and have to constantly put people down just to keep riding that high, or having a hobby that you're not too good at, but you're actually working out because you're having fun and makes you feel good. Hell, on that note, that brings up another question. What even is cringe? The word cringe, when used in a more traditional sense, means to have a reaction to something along the lines of shame, disgust, embarrassment, or awkwardness. But as of recently, it shifted from being a reaction to a descriptor. Don't say you like these video games because it means a lot to you. That's cringe. You can't enjoy an animated show because it's cringe and made for toddlers. Didn't you hear, bro? Analyzing the themes and messages of the media you consume is cringe. We should only take things ever at face value. Cringe this, base that you can barely do anything these days without being called lame by a bunch of people who also don't have lives. The words cringe and based have been used so much so that they've now lost almost all meaning. You see, to be based is to be rooted in truth and authenticity in spite of what other people may say or think. Because of this, the word based can be used to describe a state of being, a mindset, but because of that, people also started to use the term based as a descriptive term for the things they agree with. To be based is now to be the opposite of cringe. But if being based is seen as a good thing and being authentic is a bad thing, doesn't that mean being based is cringe in and of itself? If being yourself and not caring what other people think is cool and based, why is it suddenly a problem you do it in a way that happens to be a little too quirky for other people's liking? It might be cringe to post self-insert fanfics from time to time, but it's not nearly as cringe as parroting manosphere nonsense that you don't really understand about committing every waking moment to the grind and thinking that treating women like objects will instantly make you some god of Riz. Who would you rather hang out with? That one kid in the back of your English class that really likes Pokemon and Undertale and rambles about the original characters and how cool the soundtracks are? Or that one kid in the back of your history class who made their entire personality hating fairies and trans people? Now, this isn't to say that some things shouldn't be discouraged and made fun of, but on the internet, people just love tearing into strangers that didn't even know they exist just for the slightest bit of satisfaction to stick it to a man that never even existed in the first place. No one's forcing you to interact with that annoying fan base you keep running into on your social media feed. No one's forcing you to keep watching random 13-year-old choppy animation memes. No one is forcing you to keep throwing yourself into topics you clearly don't enjoy just to have an excuse to get into arguments. Frankly, as long as people are having fun and not hurting anybody, a decent chunk of things people call cringe are just things people aren't used to seeing. Cringe culture never died. It might have gotten weaker, sure, but in the end, we never truly got rid of it. Much like bullying, it only evolved with the times, changed to be more subtle and socially acceptable, so people wouldn't question it as much anymore. We might not get hour-long cringe compilations, but what we do get are video essays and call-out posts ripping into people for having weird hobbies and framing them as some kind of danger to the community at large. People may not be called slaves for trying to draw kids that are gay, don't conform to traditional beauty standards, or aren't white, but there will always be that one crowd of people that go on and on about how forced diversity is a bad thing, how people don't look or act like that. The truth is, being based isn't about being the baddest motherfucker that ever exists. Being based is about being you and having values, having standards that you stick to because you believe in them, not because someone told you to. Being based isn't about the absence of cringe. It's about the acceptance of cringe and deciding whether or not that cringe is something you can use to better yourself. In life, there's good cringe, which is rooted in authenticity. And then you have bad cringe, which is rooted in insincerity. Good cringe, which is the acceptance of oneself and all the ugliness that comes with it, but continuing to grow in spite of that. And then bad cringe, the rejection of betterment in favor of bringing others down or wallowing in your own self-destructive habits. If being based takes being cringe, that would mean being cringe is to be free. Who cares if other people call you a weirdo for wanting to make out with an indie game character? It's your boat to float, not theirs. Write that self-indulgent fan fiction. Draw that OC of an overly complicated design. Gush about the things you like. Be you. Because in recent years, especially after more and more people started using the internet on a more frequent basis due to the pandemic, it's like people have forgotten that the internet was so widely used amongst nerds and outcasts was because it was one of the few places they could safely be themselves without having put on a mask. Or, at the very least, they can get away with being themselves more than they could in real life. Life's short enough as is. Why waste the little time we have just trying to be people we aren't? Fuck, the world might be ending soon enough. It's not like any of it's gonna matter in a few years anyway. Draw yourself making out of an anime character. Make an animatic that OC is set to an overly self-indulgent song you like. Like that quirky gay indie web novel that's been bouncing around the back of your head the past couple years now. Watch that one show you like even though you're far from its target demographic. Come on, the sky's the limit if you don't give a shit. It's not like you're gonna get another chance to do this anytime soon. Better make it count when you can, right? But before we wrap things up, there is one thing I've been waiting to talk about, and without this video would feel a little incomplete. So, even if you don't use the internet on a daily basis, I can guarantee with absolute certainty that you've heard someone complain about how sensitive this new generation is to how reliant they are on technology. And to that I say, old people have been complaining about young people ever since we evolved the mental faculties to do it. Granted, it's not like some of these complaints are entirely unfounded. Being dumb and caring about stupid stuff kind of comes to the whole being young thing, but like I said earlier, there's not a whole lot to do if you're young these days, especially if you're socially awkward and don't have too many friends. Thing is, thanks to the internet, not only can people solve some of those problems, they can also start looking into the root causes of why they have them to begin with. It's a tale as old as time. People spend their entire lives not knowing why they feel miserable all the time and constantly wonder why. That is, until someone who feels the exact same way but knows more pulls them aside, suddenly everything just clicks into place. Sometimes it's unresolved trauma, sometimes an undiagnosed mental illness, sometimes an identity crisis, the list goes on. Everyone's answers might be different, but the point is, not everyone has the opportunity to safely explore who they are in real life. Online, though, it might not be a professional diagnosis, but a push in the right direction is better than having no direction to begin with. I wouldn't say people have gotten more sensitive over the years, but it's more so that people are allowed to be themselves more openly without having to worry about being shunned for it. Riddle me this, do you know what a he-him lesbian is? I sure did until a few months back, but it's enhanced my Twitter feed ever since. But I can guarantee you this, people would kill you with hammers if you even knew what those words meant back in the 1930s. They say the sudden uptick of queer neurodivergent youth is some kind of plot by the government to brainwash the masses, but consider the following. If people spent decades of their life fighting for the right to exist and win, chances are that more and more people are going to feel safe existing the way they are and advocate for themselves accordingly. Now, I'm not going to say that the kids will be staging a socialist revolution anytime soon. A good chunk of them can't even order Popeyes without having a mental breakdown, but compared to how bad people had it back then, maybe the kids will be alright this time. It's not an ideal situation by any means, but thanks to the internet, I like to think Gen Z and I guess by extension Gen Alpha are a lot more aware of the current state of things, so hopefully, maybe things will get better sometime soon. I wouldn't say that Gen Z and Alpha are inherently more sensitive per se, but rather are more open about how we feel, and because of that, we're having conversations that no one would have even thought of having a few generations back. There's been some growing pains here and there, definitely a whole lot of infighting, but that's just the way things go sometimes. Eventually, everyone mellows out a little bit and looks back upon their younger selves and goes, God, was he really that annoying back then? It happened to your parents, it happened to your teachers, it's happened to you, and if you end up having kids, it's gonna happen to them too eventually. Being immature isn't necessarily a bad thing, you just have to grow out of it eventually. But what do I know? I'm just some loser on the internet who has opinions on things sometimes. Difference is, I'm just pretty good at making those opinions other people's problems sometimes. If you enjoyed the Yap session, feel free to drop a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon too if you want to see more of this. So without further ado, thank you for coming, thank you for staying, and thank you for watching the show. Something go, meal. Peace.